So this is the grate. The grate will sit on the bridge and in the centre like that. It goes in that way to the back of the engine because that goes over the rear axle. So to put the grate in, you open the grate at the bottom there, the ash pan at the bottom, and then take the grate off, and we'll put that in afterwards. So in it goes. You shove it up backwards first and then line the holes up, and then put the pin in from the other side, which is there. It goes through the hole and there, and then there's a little split pin here which will hold that in there like that, and then the grate has got a little bent bit on that side. That's the back of the engine, and it goes in bent that way, not that way, and you shove it in up and over that pin that you've just put in, like that, and that's in, and then you can close that little door. That's it. Now between the wheels there are two blow-down valves. This is them. It's just a square, and you open that up with a spanner and it will blow down the boiler. This is on the foundation ring of the boiler, so it's right at the lowest point of the boiler. So any salts, any muck, any debris will get blown out of there, yeah.
Does it empty these as well?
It doesn't empty the tanks, it's just purely on the boiler, that. And there's one round here as well, I think. Yes, so there's one on each side, so that you can get clear, you can make sure that the boiler is clear on both sides of the boiler. Now for emptying the tank, so this little pad on the side, there's a little hole there, and that just pops over there like that, and then that's a hand pump, and that again pumps water in from the side tanks into the boiler. So anything that's a pump, that or the steam pump, they pump from the side tanks into the boiler. Sometimes the water in the side tanks gets hot, and that's what stops it working on an injector, because an injector has to have cold water in order to work properly, really. This engine, in the past, it's had an axle pump and a bypass valve, which would pump water into the boiler when the bypass valve's shut, and when the bypass valve's open, it would bypass the boiler and go from the tank back into the tank again. Now the mechanism for that is still here underneath, so this tape and that pipe and that hole there and this eccentric there, which you can just about see, is all the parts for that you need, as well as these parts here. They can be quite easily put back together again. This is the piston ram for the pump, this is the eccentric that drives it, and this is the non-return valve that makes it work. But it's not necessary with all the other forms of water getting in on there, but that's what that valve is, in case you forget. This valve here is the steam pump on the side of the engine, which operates two cylinders which pump steam in and out, and the valves of which are here, and then that drives two water pump cylinders down the bottom, which will pump water in through these rails, feed and supply, and that goes in through to the clack on the boiler, so that will feed the boiler with water. And you turn it on and you'll be able to graduate it. So if you've wound that right out, the engine will be going like crazy, and if you wind that back in again, the engine will be going just a little bit. And you'll probably find that shut, you'll probably find that about there is probably right for the engine just ticking over at sort of speed, and that should be enough to keep it full of water. This is the blower, so that blows a jet of steam up the chimney and pulls the fire out faster. So when you turn the blower on, you'll hear it go at the chimney, and you'll hear it pulling the fire through. Shut. That one there is the injector steam. Now there's a water supply on this engine underneath here, which is designed to have a silicone hose on it and run from a tender behind, so that the water for the injector is kept cold. So once the water's flowing through there, which can either be free flowing or you can have a valve to turn it off and on, then this is the steam injector, and you turn that on and that will blow steam into the injector, which already has water going to it. There's the injector. So the water supply that you've just seen is here, that goes down there and up and into the injector, and the steam does the same thing. It comes into this pipe here from that valve that I've just shown you and goes through the injector, takes the steam with it and the water with it, and goes off that way up into the clack, into the boiler. That's what that is. So the next thing is we've got the regulator, which is the fast and slow. So when you open that like that, it lets steam go from the boiler into the cylinders. Now it'll do nothing unless it's in forward, so that's in mid-gear at the moment. You pull the lever up like that, push it into forwards, and then you can open the regulator. Now if this is the first time you've steamed it and the cylinders are cold, then there's a drain cock lever here on the floor. When that's pulled towards you, the drain cocks are open. When it's pushed away from you, the drain cocks are shut. So with them open, when you put steam into the cylinders like that, the hot steam hits the cold cylinders and it condenses, and water can get stuck in either side of the piston. And if the piston's moving backwards and forwards, it can try and compress that water that's in here now stuck, and it can't get out. So you have a little valve underneath, which is the drain cock, and there's one there at the front and one at the back, and that little lever there opens them or shuts them, and that allows, when you're starting off, the condensate to be squeezed out of there rather than getting squeezed through all the valves and putting unnecessary pressure on the pistons and the cylinders and getting squirted out of the chimney. On a full-size engine, that can crack a cylinder because it generates huge volumes of pressure. But on a miniature engine, it will generally just squirt the water out of the chimney and you'll get wet. So once you've started off and the water that's coming out of the cylinders is now steam, you can shut the drain cocks and you're away. You can open the regulator more and it'll go faster, shut the regulator and it'll go slower. The same thing goes, you've got reverse, which you can pull it into reverse, and exactly the same situation applies there. That goes fast in reverse and slow in reverse. In mid-gear there, it shouldn't go anywhere. You should be able to open the regulator now and nothing will happen. It will just sit there and hiss. It won't go forwards or backwards. The last thing on here is, well, almost the last thing, is this wheel here. This is a gauge glass blowdown. Now, the water level in the boiler is shown on here, and the thin blue line inside will stay thin unless there's water in it. When there's water in it, the blue line looks slightly fatter, so you know generally whether there's water in it or not. But sometimes if the water's right up the top, so you can't see a water level, you don't know whether it's full or empty, unless you can remember exactly how thick that blue line is. So there's a good way to check. This little valve here allows you to blow down the gauge glass. So when you open that, you'll see the water level go down and out to the bottom, and then when you shut it, you'll see the water level bounce back up to beyond the top, and that's the way you'll know it's full or not. If when you open and shut that, nothing happens in there, you know that you've got no water in it, and that's bad. Lubrication on this engine's mechanical, so it's there. You fill that reservoir with steam oil, and every time the engine goes round, the valve gear goes backwards and forwards, and it clicks the little pump round one click every time, like that. And if I roll it round, you can see the little pump going up and down there, which is pumping steam oil into the cylinders. It's a very straightforward and usually foolproof system, and it's quite easy to use. But that will keep pumping the oil into the cylinders every time it runs. And there's one other thing on this that has oil in the top here under these two little lids. There's a plug into the valve chest of the cylinder, which is the top part of the cylinder. Now there's one on each side, and they're there just for winter maintenance, and after you've used it, you can pop those off. That one's a bit stiff, but it will come off. You can pop that out when it's not in use and there's no steam in it, and you can just pour steam oil directly into the cylinders and roll it backwards and forwards a couple of times just to get the oil pumped through the cylinders to make sure it's lubricated over winter. Does that come out then, that's good? Yeah. Last few things. This is the whistle, so when you blow that, it goes, and it's actually on this engine, I think it's down here, and it's a chime whistle, so it's got 3 individual whistles in one there. Right. So that'll make a 3-note chime whistle. And then we talked about the clacks for the injector. So when the injector puts water in, and when the steam pump puts water in, and when the hand pump puts water in, they all go into the boiler through one of these 2 clack valves. It's a non-return valve. There's one there and there's one there, and they're basically a valve with a ball bearing, in this case a stainless steel ball bearing, on a seat, and the boiler pressure pushes the ball bearing down onto the seat, and the water pressure going in can push the ball off the seat, overcoming the boiler pressure, and go into the boiler. For maintenance, if you take that square on the top. If you turn that round and open up there, you'll see the ball bearings loose in there, and you can take it out. You can even unscrew those and stick them in some citric acid, something like that, just as a gentle pickling, a gentle acid action, just to get rid of all the salts that are in there and clean them up and make sure that they're good.